Al, you have been busy investigating.
I have
Doubly investigating.
so much investigations.
So much investigation, so little time.
True.
So much collection.
Yep.
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 Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
Hello, welcome to this week's episode of Seasonal Anime Checkup OVA. It's a podcast where we have conversations about video games, anime, and manga. Hello, I'm Jared, always by Doc, Al, and Ladium.
Hello.
This is episode number 426. And Al's going to tell us about the Ace Attorney Investigations Collection,
Mm-hmm.
which features, of course, Ace Attorney Investigations 1 and 2.
Yes. Where you play as one Miles Edgeworth.
Yes.
Um, which was different for the time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Not just you playing as Miles, but also that it was a game where you had like a sprite and walked around and investigated things that way, as opposed to just like talking.
Right.
So it visually was very different. It gameplay was very different, but still has a lot of the same like hallmarks of the series, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But we get to see what one Miles Edgeworth is up to, and we get to learn about the legacy of the father.
The Legacy of the Fada.
Because that's what both of these games are about, is legacy of the father. Um, just in some different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so worth mentioning that I played the original Investigations on the DS, when it came out in '09.
Yes.
Um, but this is the first time that 2 has come stateside.
Yeah, 2 is famously one of one of those games that had just never come out over here at this point in time had gotten like a fan translation, which a lot of people had played.
hmm
And then finally with this collection, they're like, hey, we're actually going to put this thing out for realsies this time. So the first time it had gotten an official release outside of Japan since its initial release in 2011.
It also upset some people because obviously they had to translate names differently.
Right.
And they're like, well, our fan translation names are the best. And it's like, I unintentionally just made a joke there, but um, um, they can't reuse fan names. They can't. That's just unless they were to license that, they can't do it.
Right. That's just the way
Like
it is.
that's the way it is. Like, if you want to play or if you want to do like a geofront situation, you can, but that's not what they did here. So, they have to come up with their own names. So there's that. Um, I'm trying to remember like what the one name is. Okay, Eustace Winter is the official translation for one of the characters, um, which is obviously a play on useless winter
Mm-hmm.
instead of Eustace. But I think the fan translation was Sebastian de Best, so everybody was real salty about it not being that. But anyway, doesn't matter. People are salty about literally everything, so I was excited to get to play it finally. I remembered some things from the first one, specifically one character and her sprite. But it was nice to get like a refresh of what it was. But the second game is absolutely the better game. Like hands down, not even a contest. The second one is the better game.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like that's been the thing that a lot of people have said about these games, especially with when the fan translation finally came out. It was like, oh, this is the one that you want to play.
hmm Um, I was mentioning to you that on Open Critic has a 90% recommended by critics, which, wow,
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty impressive. And it's generally like Metacritic says 85 out of 100 for the Switch.
Mm-hmm.
That's not that bad, but yeah, the reviews are pretty high. It was cool to get to play the first one, then finally get to play the second one. But yeah, you get to play as a grumpy little prosecutor man
You
who's not
do for sure.
not actually doing any prosecuting in either of these games.
I mean, this is the final collection that they can put out.
Yeah,
All the other games are now in specific collections that you can just like get on modern consoles now.
that means they need to bring us a new one.
That's true.
Actually, you know what they need to do?
Hmm.
The Ace Attorney Layton game. They need to bring that back out.
Maybe for Switch 2.
Yeah, that's what they should do. Because that game was really good. And I don't think a lot of people played it. Because they're jerks.
Yeah, that's exactly why they're jerks.
Oh man. Okay, so is there anything specifically we should talk about? I don't know, there's some development stuff, but I haven't read through it to see if there's anything interesting about it.
I mean, there's a lot of development stuff for both games, so
Oh, did you see both of them? Did you see something that you think is like, wow, we should talk about that?
no, I just saw there's the big blocks of text, and I was like, that's a lot of words.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fair. Um, but yeah, you play, you walk around. You have a new character partner friend. Her name is Kay Faraday.
Hmm.
She's kind of like your Maya type character, so that Miles is not entirely on his own, but he also has his good old pal Gumshoe.
Why didn't they just make Gumshoe the
They should
the
have.
Maya character?
They should have, honestly. They did in a few sections, but like Kay is less important for the second game, but very important for the first game.
Hmm.
And she also has a thing called Little Thief that she can use to make like reproductions of a crime scene. So that way they can like investigate and find things that are not necessarily there right now. So that's like the, I guess, neat thing. There's also like a logic section where you're given like puzzle pieces that you have to put together until Edgeworth comes up with an epiphany.
Going real literal with the idea that these are puzzle games.
Yeah, yeah, literally like they're puzzle pieces. You connect them. Um, so yeah, it's between Trials and Tribulations and Apollo Justice.
Right.
And they're pretty close together in terms of like when they take place. But there's this whole thing about like a smuggling ring and there's the Yatagarasu who's like a thief. Um, and you have to figure out what that deal is. And then you also have this political situation with a country called Xingfa. And there is a feller from there. Forgetting his name. Why am I forgetting his name? Shilong Lang. I promise that was a word. I said it really quick. Shilong Lang is his name. He is working with Interpol, and he is an investigator from Jingfa, and he hates prosecutors.
Her.
He thinks they're the worst. So he's like, I'm not working with you. Um, so he's just gonna get in your way a lot. That's just how it is. He's kind of your adversary in this.
Hmm.
Um, I'm trying to figure out where do I start with this. Like it all ties back to this smuggling ring. Um, and I wish that the wiki actually had this set up in a way that like it talks about the episodes, but it doesn't really do that. The one that I remember the most, and even remember the most from the first one, is like there's one where you're on an airplane and Edgeworth passes out, gets bonked, and then and finds a dead body, and everybody's like, "Oh, well, you murdered a guy. That's terrible."
You murdered a guy in your sleep.
Um, and then there's this character called Camille, like the tea.
Right.
And she is Eepy.
Shocker.
She's just constantly falling asleep. But good Lord, does she have some tiggle bitties? And like that was the thing that I remember from this game was Camille and her tiggle bitties. And also she kind of resembles Cammy, like from Street Fighter,
Right.
other than the boobas. So I always thought that was fun. But yeah, I remembered her very much, and I'm like, okay, well, I know where this one's going. I didn't remember some of the other ones and where they were going, but that one I do remember. Um, but everything ties back to the smuggling ring. When you get off the airplane, Francesca von Karma shows up and she's like, by the way, I'm working with Interpol now, which I don't know why all these prosecutors are working with Interpol, but sure. Um, and she's trying to figure out like how this smuggling ring is going down with Jingfa. Um, Meanwhile, Edgeworth is hanging out with Kay Faraday, who again claims that she's the Yatagarasu. She's stealing for the truth. Um, there are a couple like cases that are tangentially involved, but like you don't really get into the meat and potatoes of the plot until a little bit later. But like there's one thing where like there's a kidnapping plot that takes place at an amusement park, and it turns out that like it was all falsified. The dude tried to like set up his own kidnapping to try and get money and run away with his girl, and it's a whole convoluted thing. Also, you can find Phoenix just like out on a boat with Maya.
Just hanging out.
Yeah, it's just hanging out. But the big thing is that you find out that the dude, the dad of the son who was setting up this whole thing, has been tied to like a counterfeiting money situation with Jingfa. So like everything kind of ties back. Cammy Mill was part of the ring. By the way, she was the murderer.
Oh no.
Oh no, the sleepy gal. She
The
murdered.
sleepy gal.
Ah! So what all this actually ends up tying into is the situation with the Yatagarasu. And you get like a flashback case with Edgeworth and like his first debut as prosecutor. And it's funny because you also get like little kid Von Karma, Francesca Von Karma, running around like trying to be a big bad, and everybody's like, "You're a child. You're a literal child." She was getting all salty about it. Um, there's also this really cool detective in this. His name is literally Detective Bad,
Good.
Badd. Yeah. Um, He's got like this tattered coat and he's all grizzlied and he's got like something sticking out of his mouth and everybody freaks out when he pulls it out because it's just a lollipop. Everybody thought he was like got a cigarette in his mouth. Um, but there was a murder of a defense attorney's sister at one point. The defense attorney's name is CCU. And there was a guy who was supposed to be like the I guess he was like the dude who supposedly did this murdering. And so he was supposed to go on trial, but then they ended up hearing a gunshot. They go into the room, and by the way, again, this is when they were much younger, and they find um that guy dead, and then Dad Faraday also dead on top of him. And he was supposed to be part of this case. And this is where you actually meet Kay for the first time. I think she's like 9 or 10 years old at this point. And like one of the first things that happens is like she finds out that her dad is dead and she like blows her nose on his ruffly bit. I forget what those things are called.
This ascot
I don't think it's an ascot. It's got a different name.
is
Um,
roughly bit.
it's a ruffly bit. Edgeworth, roughly, nope, roughly thing name. Jabbot? Jabot? Jabot?
Sure.
Oh my God. I Googled Edgeworth roughly thing name and it says the roughly thing that Miles Edgeworth wears is called a Jabbot
There you
thing.
go.
Thanks. Um, that's super funny. But she blows her nose on that and he's like, you can just have that. It's all good. Um, but you find out that like there's this whole situation with the Yagatarasu of like Faraday was being accused of being the thief. Um, but then everything like kind of comes together and you realize that like the Yagatarasu was a combo of Dad Faraday, Detective Bad, and CCU, who is now a baddie and is the one who murdered Faraday. And she runs away and has been on the loose for many, many years. Which then takes us to like the big conclusion where you're at the Jingfa embassy, and there's a whole lot of wild stuff happening. There's fires everywhere. People are dying. Um, Xilong Lang and his assistant Shina are there and are basically like trying to keep you from doing anything. Um, you do some investigating as you do.
No.
Yeah. And Kay gets accused of being the murderer, and so you have to like clear Kay's name, which oh, Callisto U or CCU? Anyway, it's one of those names. I don't remember. It's one of those U's. Um there are two of them. But anyway, um as you're going along doing this, you're realizing like the two embassies are basically the exact same. There's some trickery afoot. You've learned that I think it is Callisto, not CC. Callisto U is actually, are you ready for this? The assistant, Sheena. Whoa! She's been undercover working in Interpol this whole time, but she's a murderer and a bad person. But she was trying to like cover shit up. Terrible. Um, but yeah, the ambassador of the I forget which country it is. One of the ambassadors. He's the one that committed the murders that happened, and he was trying to frame um one of the secretaries who's the one that died. But then Kay got caught up in it. There's this whole thing about like diplomatic immunity, and Edgeworth is like, "Nah, this, you're dumb," and solves it, and everything's fine. Uh, this one again is the weaker of the two.
Hmm.
Um, but this one is like you remember how I mentioned at the beginning that like it's legacy of the father.
Right.
This one is the legacy of Kay's dad.
Hmm.
Um, because a lot of this is her figuring out like why was he the Yatagarasu? What am I supposed to be doing? Like how do I play into this? How do I live up to the name of my dad? Um, that kind of thing. I also forgot to mention that there's a whole thing about a prosecutor murdering a guy, but it doesn't really matter that much. He sucked. Not the guy, the prosecutor. But he did have a basketball hoop outside of his office, so that's kind of cool.
Basketball.
It's your favorite sport.
Hmm.
All right, I'll probably do better on remembering how to talk about two.
Because you played it more recently.
I just played it recently. Um, this one does add in like mind chess as a new gameplay mechanic where you have to like either probe them until you're able to come up with clues and then use the clues to knock out their chess pieces, or you just have to like wait until they've calmed down enough that you can like get in their head. It's a really interesting mechanic. It doesn't always work well, but it's fun. And given the fact that like canonically Edgeworth is a big fan of chess, like it makes sense. Yeah, it's just mind chess. That's the new thing in this one.
Hmm.
It's fun. I like it. So this one takes place apparently a week after after the previous game. Um, so yeah, it's pretty quick. Um, and this one starts out with an assassination attempt. You're just starting off with a bang, literally. The president of Zhengfa is on his boat airplane thingy. I forgot what those are called.
Boat airplane thingy.
Yeah, it's the kind of airplane that you can land on water,
Yeah.
you know? I don't know what those are called.
I don't think they call those boats.
Well,
Those are still airplanes.
it's still kind of a boat. It's on water. It's not sinking. Work with me. Um, so yeah, there's an assassination attempt. Oh no. Um, he survives the assassination attempt, but his bodyguard, Rook, is dead. And so there's a whole lot of questions about like how did this feller die because none of it makes sense. They think that there's this reporter there that they think that maybe she was involved with it, but turns out she wasn't. Um, what happened is that the president, damn, this is gonna be an interesting thing to say. Are you ready?
Hmm.
The president was upset that his popularity was declining, so they were going to stage an assassination attempt. Um, however, it went wrong, and the second in command of the presidential guard, Bronco Knight, was jealous of Rook and moited him. So ripperoni and pepperoni, staging assassinations. Interesting.
Hmm.
I'm not going to say anything. Um, anyway, Knight gets arrested. These are all very intertwined stories, by the way. He gets arrested, and then he's found dead in prison just like a few days after that. Um, so there's a lot of questions on like how did he die? He gets found in part of a prison he shouldn't have access to because he's supposed to be in the holding cells, but he's in the prison proper. Um, There was a circus that came to the prison at the same time, and his best friend Simon Saint is one of the circus fellers, and he's suspected of murdering his friend. Um, Edgeworth is doing his best, just investigating. But then he's interrupted. There is a judge running around. Her name is Gavel, and she assigns Eustace Winter to take Edgeworth's place in this. Um, so he's basically kicked off the case, and Edgeworth's like, "How do I investigate this? Because like I got kicked off the case. They're gonna investigate me as a prosecutor. They're gonna try and take away my badge. This is up." Enter Eddie Fender. Which, for the record, is a fantastic pun name because Eddie Fender, a defender. You get it?
Mm-hmm.
It's so good. Um, so Eddie Fender comes in and is like, "Hi, hello. I will be the defense attorney for Simon Saint. I work for Edgeworth and Co. By the way, Edgeworth, your dad was my teacher. Do you want to work as like under me right now as a defense attorney and like we'll solve this whole thing together?" Um, and Edgeworth obviously jumps on that because he wants to figure out this situation, what's going on. Um, so there are a few inmates that you have to question, figure out what's going on. Like there's a whole prison break sequence. There's a hugely famous, infamous, I don't know what you want to say, assassin that's in this prison. His name's Canis. Canis. He has a big dog that he uses to moita. He also is blind, but he's never missed a kill, and everybody kind of fears him, which is fair. Um, there is also a warden in this called Fifi Laguarde, and turns out, hey, she's the one who killed Bronco Knight because she thought that he was working with Candace and was going to try and kill her. Um, they found the murder weapon in the mouth of an alligator.
An alligator.
No. Um, okay, so Saint is free. Yay, he didn't kill his friend. But Gavel is like, "Hey, bro, you keep doing this stuff and I will take your badge. Like, you're not assigned to this. This is not okay." Um, it's also worth mentioning that Winter is completely terrible at everything he does. Like you have to sometimes do like cross-examinations with his testimony, and it's just like the worst testimony you've ever seen in any Ace Attorney game in your entire life. Like it's useless testimony every single time, and he's just bad at his job. So like everybody's like, "Oh yeah, this great prosecutor kid's coming in. He's gonna do all this great stuff," but he's just like dumb as a box of rocks. But he thinks he's great. Um, he's also, do you remember like the Academy? Was
The
it
Academy.
in the sequel to Apollo Justice? I think it's in that one where Athena was going. It's like the one
Yeah,
where you can go to be like a
yeah,
defense or prosecutor.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Eustace is going to that school and wears the uniform. So
Nah, oh
so that's
nay.
interesting. He's like the top of his class as a prosecutor there. That'll come up later. Um, so you get some backstory um at this point about like Gregory Edgeworth and like his relationship with Eddie Fender and this case that they were working on 18 years ago, I think. that there was this man called Samson Tangaroa. That
What a name.
yeah, he was thought that he murdered a pastry chef called Artie Frost during a cooking competition.
What a name.
Hmm. There's this big cooking competition he set up. Tangaroa built a big pirate ship made out of chocolate. And at one point, the ship falls, breaks open a treasure chest, and they find Artie Frost's body in there. Um, he also has a protege named Judy Bound, and Judy is basically like his adopted kid, Tangaroa's adopted kid, and she tries to keep things together as much as she can. But they also have like a kids baking show together where they also sing. And we find out that Edgeworth pretends that he didn't know it, but that he actually watched it as a kid. So that's kind of funny.
That tracks.
Hmm. Um, so you're playing in the past as Gregory and Fender, and you're trying to do all this investigation, and who shows up but Manfred von Karma? Whoa! And he's trying to keep you from doing anything because that's what he does. Um, he also ends up basically torturing Tangaroa into confessing, which is real messed up. And there is a pretty significant thing that happens in Ace Attorney lore where Gregory Edgeworth is the only person who put any kind of negative mark on Manfred von Karma's record because he accused
Mm-hmm.
him of falsifying evidence.
Mm-hmm.
This is that case.
Mm-hmm.
This is the case that leads to DL6 and Gregory's death. Wow. Can you imagine? Like, this is the case, a case where a giant chocolate pirate ship supposedly murdered a guy.
Yep.
Yep. So Edgeworth and Fender go back to the house where all that happened that's now open as a museum. They find Judy Bound there again, and like there are exhibits set up that are supposed to emulate like what the art exhibits, like the edible art exhibits looked like at the time. Um, but then something happens and a poison bomb basically goes off and it almost kills a guy. Um, what's his name? Gusto is his last name. I can't remember his first name.
Carmelo.
Carmelo Gusto? Did you look
Mm-hmm.
that up?
No, it's just in here on the Wikipedia page.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Um, so yeah, there's a trap. Larry ends up getting involved at one point. They think that he did it for like 10 seconds and then they realize like no, he's not smart enough to do this. Um, but you have like a gal who had illegally entered the competition 18 years ago, but she's actually a pharmaceutical worker and she's trying to win the ultimate cookbook that's the prize for doing this competition. And essentially what the cookbook is a bunch of like pharmaceutical stuff. Like I was gonna say recipes, but that's not correct. Formulas for medications and things like that. Um, and it turns out that like the whole thing was that the poison bomb was set up by Judy Bound because she figured if she can replicate the situation like it was 18 years ago, she could pull out the guy who murdered or who set up Tangaroa as the murderer, which is incorrect. Um, and obviously Gusto took the bait and almost died. Uh, But once he comes back around, he's like, you can't touch me. Statute of limitations is up. You're an idiot. I murdered that guy. I don't care. Um, so he was trying to get the cookbook because he has no sense of taste. And there was a recipe in the book that could like solve that issue. And you also find out that Artie Frost and Gusto had two, like they each had a son, and their sons went missing the day of the competition. This will come up again. Um, but Gusto's also like, I don't care about my son. He disappeared, and like I left the country and went and got to be a great pastry chef. Like, whatever. Everyone's like, dude, you suck. Like, what do you mean you don't care about your son? That's terrible. Um, so yeah, it all gets figured out. Because hey, it turns out because Gusto fled the country and did all of his pastry stuff, the statute of limitations was paused for several years, which I don't think is how this legally works, but it's fine. Um, and they're just in time for the statute of limitations. He gets charged. Judy also gets charged for, trying to murder a guy. Um, but Tangaroa gets free. He comes in and is basically like, Judy, I'll keep the house together and I'll bring you chocolates every day until you're free. And I love you. You're my daughter. Which is really cute. Um, a lot of this will come back up. And I'm sure you're also noticing like, hey, there are some dad situations going on here,
Just a
especially
few.
especially with this case. Um, so moving on, Kay ends up being accused of murdering a defense attorney, but she's also an amnesiac and she's very, very hurt. Um, basically, like a nurse brings Kay to Edgeworth's office, is like, hey, do you know this kid? Like, she had your business card on her, and that's the only thing we can really find to identify her. Like, do you know her? Um, and so Edgeworth, like, yes, that's Kay. I'll take care of her. It's fine. But she doesn't remember anything, and so she like thinks maybe she did murder Rosie. Gavel is like, hey, do you remember how I was threatening your badge? You keep interfering. If you are interfering with this K case, we're definitely gonna take it. And Edgeworth's like, you know what? It. I don't want this thing anyway. Just gives it up. And he's like, I'm just gonna investigate with Fender and Emma Skye, who shows up. Uh,
Yeah.
she's been in school in Europe. She shows up for a little bit. Um, and a lot of this is where Edgeworth starts questioning, like, do I even want to continue being a prosecutor? And Fender is fueling that fire, being like, you're welcome back at your old man's office. You can be a defense attorney with me, like Edgeworth and Co. It's already there. So a lot of that is happening at that point. Um, but they find out that there's like an illegal auction that's been going off, that like evidence from criminal cases that they've been dealing with in the past two games is showing up, being sold for lots and lots of money. Um, Also, Lotta Hart, who Ace Attorney fans will recognize, shows up again. She was trying to get her scoop, and she ends up making a recording about whoever murdered Rosie, talking about a burn mark. Worth mentioning, everybody that goes into the auction has to wear a mask and has to have a voice changer, so you can't determine who is what. Um, so they're figuring out, okay, like what's happening here. Um, they end up holding Edgeworth's meeting, and Gavel is like, "Hey, by the way, here is the head of the prosecutor.
Prosecutor.
No, prosecute. This is prosecutorial?
Prosecutorial.
Yes. There we go. I got it. I'm never gonna say that word again. Excellence. He's the lead of it. Um, his name is Excelsius Winter. He's Eustace's daddy. Wow, dad's coming up again. Who could have seen this coming?
Yay, nepotism.
Yay! So yeah, he is the auctioneer. He is corrupt as he also reveals in this section that Eustace has basically been like handed everything. He's been manipulating everything behind the scenes. That like Eustace is a big dum dum, that he's not earned anything that he has, that like his dad hates him. And so Eustace is going through it right now. He like freaks out, runs away. Understandable. Um, but before all that happens, he has a reaction when he hears the whole thing about the burn mark. And everybody's like, huh, that's interesting that he would have that reaction. Then, he skedaddles away. Um, and it turns out that like Gavel and Ringer had been investigating, trying to figure out like who was doing all of these bad things. Um, and wow, it was Excelsius, and he has a burn on his chin. Hmm, wonder why Eustace freaked out about the burn. Wow. Um, Also Kay gets her memories back. There's a really, really good moment here though with Edgeworth and Kay where Kay's like basically giving up and is gonna say like, I did it, it's fine, whatever. And he's like, I'm not giving up on you. This is not happening. And it's just like a really, really good scene where you have to basically like tear apart her testimony in order to make her see like he believes in you, you have to believe in yourself. It's great. And then she gets all her memories back. Hell yeah. Um, Also really good Ace Attorney breakdown animations. Excelsius has like this big beard that he keeps pulling on. And the reveal is that it's a wig. Uh, but he's also always playing with a lighter, like one of those flip top lighters.
Yeah.
And the big breakdown scene when they reveal that he has the burn is him like setting the wig beard on fire. It's like nice. Um, so yeah, all that happens. Woo! Um, and then hey, do you remember that president who there was an assassination attempt on in the beginning of the game?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's dead.
Oh no.
Um, a lot of heart thinks that basically Godzilla killed
What?
him. Yep.
All right.
Yep. Um, and there's been this kid that pops up a few times in the background. His name is Sean Finn. He's an actor, which is good. Um, and it's also revealed that Sean Finn is Gavel's adopted son. Um, Excelsius is trying to make sure that Fifi Lagarde's trial goes in her favor. Ends up basically like saying he kidnapped her son, that she needs to get Lagarde found innocent or like, bad things will happen to her son. So she's trying to figure stuff out, freaking out. Edgeworth is like, look, give me like a few hours. I'll get this figured out. Like just delay. That's all I'm asking you. So they end up asking around. They find out that like somebody was taken away in a big chest in a taxi. And so they asked the taxi driver, like, hey, can you just take us to that place where you went before? And they do. And they go into a garage and they realize, like, oh, this is the Winter house. Interesting. There's also like some motorcycle gear around, including some motorcycle gloves that have a very specific design on them. Sure, that won't be relevant or anything. Um, And then they find the big box that was hauled in there, and they open it, and Eustace is in there. Um, because Excelsius's goons kidnapped the wrong kid. And so Eustace is basically like, all right, my dad thinks I'm worthless. I feel like I'm worthless. My dad kidnapped me accidentally. You know what? I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna do something. Just give me a moment. I'll figure it out. Which is, you have to do a mind chess with him to get all this to go down, which it's hilarious because you get a trophy that like the whole thing is that this is like one of the best moments of the game, by the way. But the whole thing is that Edgeworth is trying to like basically say, Eustace, everything's been handed to you at this point. None of it's real. But if you're actually interested in going down this route and being a prosecutor, I will mentor you. I will be on your side. I will always be there. I was like, Edgeworth, look at you go. I cried with this whole situation. It was great. Um, but you get a trophy in the game if you start the mind chess. Like there are options that you're given, and the first one is like, asking him a question, but the second one is basically just like, Eustace, you are the most worthless thing ever, blah 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 blah. And you get a trophy if you select that because he just like gives up and stops existing, basically. It's like, oh Jesus, and the trophy something like tell Eustace the worst thing that you possibly could. It's like, oop.
Oops.
Um, but it was a beautiful, beautiful moment. And it's also a really like powerful thing for Edgeworth to be like, hey, I will be your mentor. I'll get you through this. Like, if this is really something you're passionate about, which you can see it like reignite that spark of like Edgeworth likes to be a prosecutor. Like he feels like that's his calling. So this is him being like, I can do the thing that I like, that I'm good at, that I care about, but I can also help this kid who needs me right now. It's great. It's beautiful. It's so good. Eustace is crying and snotting through the whole thing. It's great. So good. Um, so anyway, we're investigating this murder, right? Also, um, Kay and our beautiful man Gumshoe, they're able to find Sean Finn before the time limit uh is up. And he was stuck in a freezer. He got kidnapped. He's stuck in a freezer. The whole reveal is that the actual president has been dead for 12 years. The president that has been running around was his body double. They the body double had hired Canis, the assassination man, to
The assassination man.
yeah, to kill the president so that he could take his place. Um, LaGuard and Excelsius were the accomplices for this. And basically, how they lured out the original president for this situation is they revealed, like, by the way, you have a son. Like, they found out that his fling, I guess, had written him a letter that he had a son. They were going to meet at this orphanage. Um, but they used that opportunity to murder him. So the body double has been playing the president for 12 years. And it gets weirder. Because Canis was trying to get out of the whole thing. He just assassinated a president. He's got to go. And a child was at the orphanage and set a fire to help him like get out. and they've been communicating ever since. And he considered him his pup, his kid. It was like the only person he said he ever really connected with. Um, and yeah, the whole reveal is that all of these things that have been going on, it's been a ploy by Saint Simon, that weird clown dude from earlier who was in the circus,
Mm-hmm.
who has been playing off as like a goofy ass kid that doesn't understand anything. Is like simple and um he's an innocent little guy. He's just a little guy, except for he's not. Um, so he was Gusto's son, the one that was taken away 18 years ago. Um, he was abducted by Bronco Knight, or with Bronco Knight and his dad, Artie Frost. They were kidnapping him because of the cooking competition, because if he couldn't help his dad taste things, then his dad wouldn't be able to make good food and would lose the competition. So then Artie Frost would win and get the book. Um, and Canis, Assassination Man, found the boys. They had gotten stuck in a car and they were freezing. And he was able to like break them out and take them to an orphanage. The orphanage was Lagarde was like the matron for it, I guess. So then the kid, who's the pup, was also Saint Simon. Um, he was the one who helped him escape. Um, but he's been, staying undercover, I guess, for this whole time. He killed Bronco, or he had Bronco Knight basically manipulated into being killed because he planted something in a chess set that's like a chisel. Or no, it's a knife. No, it is a chisel. I don't remember. Anyway, it's got like one of the assassination guy's bells on it because he's known for his bells. And so when the guard was searching his stuff and found that, she assumed that he was like working with Canis and murdered him. So he set all that up. And he was under the assumption that he was already Frost's kid. And it's like, no, um, you were the other guy's kid. He's like, no, no, my dad was murdered. It's like, your dad did the murdering. Oops. Um,
Oops.
so yeah, basically like everything was all the strings were pulled by this dude. Also, Rosie, Rosie, the lady from the last case, her fiance was the one who witnessed the murder of the president, and he ended up getting killed because of that. Um, and then Saint Simon ended up like trying to frame Kay for the murder using a hot air balloon to get her up to where she needed to be. The funny thing about this, I mean, there are many funny things about this whole situation, but do you remember how I said that Lotta Hart thought that like a Godzilla thing stepped on the president, killed him?
Yes.
How do you think Saint actually killed him?
Got real big and squished him like he was on the Dynasty Warriors map.
Oh, that's funny. He landed the hot air balloon on him.
That all right? That also works.
Yep, that's how he murdered him. Then he pulled his body up, froze it for a while to try and like keep the time of death hidden. Um, it's a mess. Um, but then Edgeworth, he ends up getting his prosecutor badge back. Um, Another thing that is worth mentioning that I kind of glossed over here is that at one point, there is a case going on against Eustace's dad, um, Excelsius, and basically like he's gonna get away with the whole thing because they have no proof. But then Eustace comes in. He's covered in filth. Everybody's like, God, you stink. What is going on? Eustace had realized that the evidence that he had for this trial against Lagarde was missing. And he's like, I gave it to my dad because I thought that was going to be the safe place for it. And then turns out my dad's a piece of shit. So it wasn't safe. And he realized like his dad disposed of the evidence. So Eustace went to the dump and dug through the trash until he could find a piece of evidence to take his dad down. It's so cool. And his dad's basically like, "Oh, look at you, you dumbass! You're going through the trash. Can't even find anything. You found a newspaper. What's that gonna do? What's that gonna do? You can't even find the knife, you idiot." Um, but turns out that the newspaper had an oil print on it with the gloves that remember I said it had a distinct design.
Mm-hmm.
It left an oil print on the newspaper. And that's how Eustace was able to prove like his dad was a part of the whole situation and dispose of the evidence and take his dad down. I was like, hell yeah, Eustace. But yeah, the whole time everyone was like, oh God, you smell really bad. Um, but again, like the whole thing, Fender and Edgeworth have a conversation at the end of like, hey, if you reconsider this whole defense attorney thing, like I'm happy to have you. And he's like, no, I'm supposed to be a prosecutor. That's the way it is. But this whole entire game, this second game for the most part, is all about that whole idea, like the legacy of the father, because like Eustace is having to figure out what is he going to do now that like he found out his entire life was basically a lie and that his dad's actually a piece of and he's determined now that he's going to figure out how to do this his own way um with the help of Edgeworth, who has also like looked at how his dad did things and is incorporating some of his thought process into it, but is still going his own way by being a prosecutor. But then you also have Saint Simon, who has the legacy of his dad, who was a murderer, um, and basically like Artie Frost set everything into motion with them getting kidnapped, and um, Bronco had to deal with his dad being dead and what does he do with that information? He ends up being a scumbag. Um I feel like there was somebody else. Oh, um yeah, Sean Finn realizing like, oh, my dad was the president of Jingfa and I never got to meet him because he died 12 years ago. And the guy that he had met that he thought was the president was not actually him. So he's like, I didn't actually ever meet my dad. Um, and so he's kind of devastated by that whole thing. And um, Saint Simon tries to like manipulate him based on that. He's like, hey, you could kill me. That'd be cool, right? Yeah. And Sean Finn's like, nah, that wouldn't actually fix anything at all. It would just make me like you. You suck. Um, so yeah, like I think it's a really cool theme to think about like how does everybody like live with that legacy and what do they do different? You know?
Mm-hmm.
So like in the first game you had Kay who realized like the Yatagarasu, the way that my dad did it, he was trying to find the truth, but ended up being a three-person team that like it didn't work out, everybody got betrayed. Um, but like the truth was always the thing that they wanted to get. And she starts the beginning of this game saying, like, I need to find two awesome girls to join my team. And by the end of it, she's like, maybe I have a team. Hey, Edgeworth and Gumshoe, you want to be my other two in the Yatagrasu? And they're like, no, no, we're good. Um, but she's trying to figure out like how do I, she's been thinking of herself as this like successor to the name and the thievery, but like it was kind of a lie, so she's having to deal with, what is her path now? Um, I don't know. I thought it was a really cool idea, personally.
Personally.
So yeah, I didn't remember the first game a whole lot, and I'm sorry about that. It's been a few months. But again, the first game is the weaker of the two. Uh, but it's they're both really, really fun. Also, for some weird reason, I went into like the art section that's unlocked in this game, and there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of shirtless dudes. Like,
You
I don't
know,
remember there being that many shirtless dudes in Ace Attorney.
sometimes you just gotta be shirtless when you're
I,
fighting for the law.
sure, I guess. Like I said, I don't remember there being that many shirtless dudes in Ace Attorney, but they're like, what if we do shirtless dudes? It's like, all right, sure. Also, just Apollo art is there for no reason, and I don't know why Apollo Justice is there at one point, but he is. Because like Apollo was out by this point.
I
So
mean,
it's
maybe
not,
it was just a thing of like, just like, sometimes those things just kind of got like combined together when they were like making the art for it.
yeah, because he's on the character design sheet for Eustace,
Mm-hmm.
like the different designs for Eustace. So I'm like, are they comparing the two and like what they might look like? Was like Eustace originally supposed to be part of Apollo Justice, maybe? Um, were like was Eustace? I don't know. I can't. I don't know what it might have been, but um, it was interesting to see him there. I was like, I know my boy Apollo. Hello.
He's here.
Um, but yeah, it's fun because Edgeworth is a very different kind of person than either Apollo or Phoenix.
Right.
So like basically you play as a grumpy smart man the whole time, and that's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also there's a lot of gumshoe, which is great.
Always fun.
Always fun. Um, you can also switch the art styles if you want to go back to the DS art style, you can.
That's neat.
Yeah, but the new sprites are much better looking, especially on a big TV.
Right. Yeah.
Hmm. But it is neat that you have the option. I think you can also swap the soundtrack back. Anyway, that's what I got.
That's what you got.
That's it. I hope you had
Well, that
fun.
well, that is the Ace Attorney Investigations collection. Yes,
Yep,
nailed it.
nailed it.
Got it.
Woo!
And that's gonna do it for us this week.
hmm
We have thoroughly investigated these two games.
I highly, highly recommend playing them.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're very, very good games. I think it's a little bit different, especially if like you're a fan of the Ace Attorney series. Like, there's no reason not to play them now
Right.
because they're out and they're fun and they're accessible.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed them.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Well, yeah. So yeah, that's gonna do it for us this week. If you'd like more from us, head on over to seasonalamycheckup.com or sac.cool. It's where you can find past episodes of this podcast and other podcasts like Jared Now Watch. You can also find columns and reviews on the site as well. If you'd like more from Ann Ladium, go to annladium.com. She's got columns and reviews. You can follow us on Twitter and TikTok at Anime Checkup. Follow us on Blue Sky seasonalamycheckup.com. You can buy our book, Sunshine Moment of the Critical Analysis of Love, Life, Sunshine, Hot Tubs, and Pac-Man on Amazon.com. You can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/SACOVA. Buys a slice of pizza. Get access to unedited versions of the podcast early. Our bonus monthly Patreon podcast, which we will have an episode up at some point
Soon.
soon. Probably got to do it this weekend.
Yep.
Yep. So look forward to that soon.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a wealth of other bonus content on the Patreon as well.
Ooh.
Next week, we will talk about either some Otome or some JRPG. Who knows which
Who
one?
knows?
Who knows?
If we do a tome, I'm gonna need your help because I can't do French pronunciations.
Ho, ho, ho.
Baguette.
Croissant.
We should probably do that one since they probably would like me to do that sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Since they
Whichever we decide to do, we'll come back and be like, here you go. Here's something new.
Yay!